When the rally is going to stop? That's the question that Jerry Gidel is about to answer, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe. So, Jerry, how are you today? We are ending up a week with another rally for corn and for soybeans. There were several weeks in a row that we are seeing this situation.
Yes, well, the Black Sea tensions are still not at all solved at this point, particularly with uh, Putin's initial commentary early this week that we were going to. The defense minister said we were pulling back 10,000 troops, but they might have rotated them from the front and put them in the back, and now there's even more, supposedly by all accounts. So that's been some of the reactions we've had on the prices this week in corn and soybeans. And to some extent, that probably the most important one in this thing is wheat, and that with the areas combatants between the two was a very prominent wheat sailing situation. Actually, even our friends in Egypt decided to buy Romanian wheat this week. So they decided not to be a buyer of either Ukrainian or Russian wheat, even if the price was slightly better for both of them this week.
And the export market for both corn and soybeans has been really strong for the United States.
Yes, that's one of the features that come back to help support us here, particularly in beans. We had a 50 million old crop and a 56 million new crop sale on soybeans. Uh, that helped kind of help bounce back things. They started on Wednesday with the commentary about the tensions in the Middle East. In general, the forecast for South America is it's been dry. Now it's staying dry until in Argentina, at least until mid to late next week. There's still kind of a twisted logic out there of it's going to continue to be some more rains after the forecasted ones at the end of next week, or if it's going to end up kind of reverting back to the current dry pattern that's kind of been going on since we had this one good weekend or 10 days or so back in January. It still hasn't been that fantastic in Argentina or parent, excuse me, in Rio Grande or Paraná in Brazil at this point. The soybeans emotionally continue to be the leader here in this markets because of protein needs, and that the dynamics though of the weather probably is going to impact maybe the corn in Argentina more. They did have a higher portion of their corn crop seeded for the second half of the year here, and so that's highly important as we get into March there in Argentina. And the same situation here. There's some double crop corn in Paraná and Rio Grande do Sul. The big one, though, of course, is Mato Grosso. Excuse me. And so far, at least the rains have been even maybe a little delayed on getting that corn in. So in some ways, it would be behoove Mato Grosso to get more of their beans out and more of their corn in before things get a little crazy here, maybe later in the summer.
Yes, and when do you think those Chinese trading companies are going to say we are not paying for this or just shift to an alternative crop?
Well, that's an interesting one. We had, and that's probably another thing we should influence things earlier this week after the weekend head fake from the Russians was that there was reports that the Chinese had washed out some South American crops, or excuse me, cargoes, I should say, of soybeans. I heard 4 to 5. Now I've heard as high as 10 that has been washed out. And that I think it's a combination of things here that's kind of hit the Brazilian Chinese purchases, and that I think the fact that to some extent we've had a high percentage of Mato Grosso being harvested and that, but I'm not sure that the weather has promoted an opportunity to get those beans up through the Amazon and get to the boats. And then the other big factor is that the two big producing areas there in the southern part of Brazil, Paraná and Rio Grande, they don't have the crop. They lost a lot of that crop, so there's not a lot of available stuff in the short term. And the background of this whole thing is that the Chinese have done this in the past. They've made purchases on a basis contract in that, and then they were supposed to price the thing sometime before the boat showed up. And sometimes they don't get around to getting it priced. It just keeps getting away from them. If they made these purchases or it actually fixed the price when they made the purchase, say anywhere from 2 to 4 months ago, wow, they'd be way ahead. But sometimes they don't, and that's probably what's part of what's happened here on some of these washout situations. And to some extent, we have also seen the Chinese being pretty hefty buyers. We just mentioned our export sales here. Some of that's unknown, but that doesn't always mean that we don't think that they're Chinese purchases. They really had not bought a lot of new crop here in the U.S. either. So I think to some extent, a lot of the unknown in new crops are definitely is Chinese. But I don't know, that's another day to get that totally figured out. At this point, the Chinese don't like people knowing their business. Nobody does, but they are particularly uh, concerned about those things. They'll go a lot of different places to buy things just so that they don't have to show up in the U.S. to get their name on the list.
And what about the wheat? We are reaching the $8 level.
That's yeah, the $8 level is part of the world we're dealing with here. Uh, it's we've been rotating around it a lot. Uh, right now, actually, some technical levels here around the 815, 817 range. If we get above there, we could get things out of it. And I think it's all tied in really to what's going on in the Black Sea. If we that particular area of wheat that's you know there's a lot of people have commitments to get shipments out of that area, and if there's any extended war situation on it, that's most likely there's not going to be boats to show up there to pick up their wheat. And I think that's what we got out of the Egyptian purchase here that actually was bought from Romania wheat, which is on the other side of on the west side of the Black Sea instead of that, from there.
Yes, and for next week, I think we have plenty of news, don't you think so?
Oh yes, we'll have, of course, the Black Sea. We'll have what's going on in South America, and probably the one of the more interesting situations will be the end of next week when we have the USDA has an annual ag outlook, as they call it, and it's kind of the an opportunity for them to talk about various subject matter that's been hot in the markets this year. It's definitely about excuse me, climate change and the impacts of different ideas and looking at cover crops and things like that. But the one thing that's always been constant in it, and this has been going on for this particular conference, has been going on for 25 plus years. I've been in the past, not going out there this year, but it turns up that on Thursday morning, the USDA's excuse me, economists, and that's we'll be putting out some general numbers, and then on Friday morning we'll get some more specifics as to what their expectations might be for the 2022-23 crop year for plantings, and they'll probably end up utilizing their previously used, excuse me, yield trends in that. I think the corn yield trend has a lot of things to desire there. We haven't been able to get really above 176 and a half, 177 like we had this year for quite some time. So I think that's going to end up being something people are watching at this point. From there, And on the corn side of things, soybeans uh, last last year they put out a baseline number, which is kind of their first one foray into this, and they had 92 million was the expectations for corn, and on beans they were looking for excuse me, I think it was 87, 87.5. From there, that's up just 300,000 in beans. And actually, in corn, that would take it down about a million three from there. Because of the high cost of inputs, fertilizer, chemicals, things like that. Some of these basic relationships that people use to make judgments as to what they should do, maybe a little bit messed up here this year. Actually, I just calculated that earlier this afternoon, that the price relationship on corn to soybeans, it really needs to be above 2.6, 2.65 relationship. Soybean prices versus a bushel versus a bushel of corn. And in that relationship, both of them here, both old and new crop. And there's always a big debate on this, to which one's more important to a producer out there. My personal opinion is the old crop is the one that's that price relationship when he goes to the elevator between his prices and the futures prices and things like that. And that's really is the one that keeps his mindset. So definitely, I'm not in the category of anticipating maybe as big a drop in the corn plantings this year. I'm kind of looking for 92.65. That's down 700,000 acres from, or there about 750. Versus last year's plantings on corn, and I'm kind of raising the beans and accordingly. To some extent, actually, if you look at some of the cash prices of new crop, the 70-cent basis on beans and 40 cents on corn, even the price relationships out there in new crop kind of favor the corn, which in its own way, I think is disappointing. We really, I think, do need to boost our bean acreage, and that out in front of us here from the standpoint that I think that particular area has more chances for old crop to slip lower here because of demand on old crop situations here, and that's going to be a potentially a stronger price in 2012, 13. Excuse me, in 2022, 23. So in that case, but that's my look at it right now. It's next week's numbers are the next step in that area. They're definitely not the producer's final decisions, and even the planning intentions that are put out on March 30th or March 31st on this spring are just intentions. This whole issue of cost and prices and all that kind of stuff is going to end up having, I think, a significant impact on some of the different areas in the Midwest. You're looking at the solid, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Nebraska, irrigation, Indiana. Those acres are pretty well nailed down. It's the North and South Dakota. It's the Southeast, and what they might do and things along the way. Those are the things that are going to finally have the big influence on where our corn and soybean final acres actually turn out to be. And so that's going to be an interesting first test of it when we see those numbers coming out early Thursday morning for some of the big numbers, and then looking for the more detailed numbers on Friday next week.
We'll check back with you, certainly. Thank you.
You bet.